Let's open the meeting, and we have several things that we need to discuss today. We talked last time at the meeting. Johnson from LaBella on to explain different things in open space, ridgelines, and so on and so forth. And we also have Joyce Martha here that is going to make a presentation to some degree after Barb's done. Barb has to go in about 40 minutes, but she's committed to another meeting, so I'm going to have her come on first and explain what she's going to discuss with you, and we'll go from there. Not Barb, can you hear me?
Yes, that sounds good. Thank you. And
Can't hear her.
nice to see so many of you in virtual mode. So
Barb, we can't hear you.
you can't hear me? You can't hear me? No?
Can you hear me? Because I can hear Barbara.
Yeah, but just a second. Barb, how about now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, very good. All right. Well, I'm just going to, I understand that you wanted a review of the resource protection materials and resources that were done for the town in the ag plan and also the open space plan. We did a training recently in the natural resource inventory, but the resources that you have available go before that. And focusing on what resources are included in that plan, as well as the parcel specific rating systems we developed for both those plans. So I don't know, I think some of you are still very familiar with that. I know Doug's used them in grant writing and so forth. I know Joyce has referred to the plans and project reviews, but I think our goal today is to bring everybody up to the same level of understanding, or at least a common level of understanding of what's in those plans. So I'm going to do a quick review of those two plans, and then we'll open it up for discussion to see what questions you might have and how I can bring any more illumination to those plans. So I'm going to share my screen, but you have to let me. Whoever's the host needs to let me share.
You can do that, or just in security, just go to security.
Oh, okay.
Share screen. Okay. All right, go ahead, Barb.
Okay, got it. Okay, you should be seeing the slides, right?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, good. Oh, I'm doing the wrong one. Okay. Okay, here we go.
Need that one on solar too.
Slide. Okay, so starting with the Agriculture Enhancement Plan, this was completed in 2016. It included a review of the agricultural lands, as well as the market conditions in the town. It included a plan and priorities, but also parcel ratings to help the town identify those farm parcels that might be suitable for grants, and also to see that those are important to the agricultural community and agricultural economy when they come up in project review. The plan mapped the soil types, and this map shows the green, brown, and blue colors are very high quality farmland. So virtually the whole town, but really concentrating in the northern part of the town, which is really where your farmland is located. We used the land cover mapping to map the farm fields. As we've talked about in the natural resource inventory training, the land cover mapping is dated now, but it's still a guide to what's out there. You need to look at aerial photos that are more current or go out in the field even better. But this shows that the farmland itself, the land that's actively farmed, is also concentrated in the northern part of the town. And it's really a big part of the town's land cover, and it still is. We looked at the watersheds because obviously farmland, can be a pollutant. It can carry pollutants to the lakes when not properly managed. We focused on agricultural environmental management as a priority action, but the streams do carry runoff into these lakes, including Canandaigua Lake watershed, which is shown in yellow. We looked at how development patterns have and have not affected farmland, and the blue and green dots on this show that the areas that are farmed were developed a long time ago, and most of the houses there, a lot of the houses there are farmhouses built in the 1800s and early 1900s, and the concentrations of new development are in, as you can see, in the red clusters and the purple clusters, new subdivisions. But even scattered development can impact agricultural land if not properly designed, with sensitivity to the drainage, fragmenting farmland, and so forth. So it's important to think about impacts. But the final result of the ag plan was a strategic farmland protection area delineated on a map. This is where the highest quality farmland by soils were located, as well as coterminous parcels, and it's outside of the sewer areas and the zoning districts that are promoting more high intensity uses. And this is a policy of the town, so you certainly should keep this in mind when looking at development proposals. Is it in the strategic farmland protection area? That means it's important to the town by policy, adopted policy.
Art, can you just pause there for a second and show that?
Sure.
For a second. So I just also want to make everybody aware. So we don't currently have any regulations to protect that strategic farmland protection area, just to be clear. But I also want to let you know, I've had the last 2 months conversations with the Agriculture Committee about possible creation draft proposal of a agriculture overlay district to overlay the strategic farmland protection area. So I think that they'll probably be advancing that, I would guess, to this committee sometime over the next couple of months. But I just want you to be aware, and it would mirror that red line that she's talking about. And then we'll see how that works, and then we can talk about the woodland protection area and the other areas too. So just want you to be aware of that.
Right. Thank you, Doug. Yes, it's it's not encoded in law, but it is in an adopted plan. So. And we did also go parcel by parcel and gave each parcel that had more than, I think it was 5 acres of farmland, a rating weighted towards the highest quality farmland soils. And those portions of the parcels that are actively farmed. So these areas show in probably, I don't know if you can see the hatch marks, the dots show the farm, the land cover that's actually in farm fields, and the colored parcel boundaries are there. So you can see that there's some very highly rated parcels, generally the larger ones with a high rating for agricultural soils. And we did separate ratings for different factors and didn't combine them because we'd really apply them in different situations. We also did ratings of natural resources, those farm parcels that are in the watershed of Canandaigua Lake, for example, or close to streams or a wetland. And because at the time the state grants were heavily weighting development pressure, we tried to denote those parcels that had developer interest or near a sewer district or water district or along highways. And these parcels, I think, did help the town identify candidates for grants. I think the ag soil rating is the most important for agricultural, future agricultural use and value for agriculture. Any questions about the ag plan before I move on to the open space plan?
Barb, I know in a conversation that I previously had with some members of this group, we talked about the ratings of all the parcels in the back of the ag plan. Could maybe just touch on that? You might not have a slide for it, that's fine, but can you just touch about that?
Well, actually, I do have a slide, so here we go. So so the parcel rating system is coded, it's a spreadsheet, so you can search by all of these parcels, and we've created a line for each parcel. So here's an example of a parcel. It's an agricultural parcel by land use. It got a soils rating of 260, which is pretty high. And then, this one has 751. I don't think this excerpt is sorted, but these are examples of the rating system and the prime soils if statewide importance, prime if drained. And then when we put the weighting measures on there, a higher rating for the prime soils, you can find out the actual rating for each one. And then the natural resource rating, similarly, it gets a 500 bonus if it's in Canandaigua Lake watershed, because we're concerned about the water quality there. And then the natural resources rating is the sum of all of the factors within that. And then there was a development pressure rating as well, and a protected land rating, which is just a 400 to 2000 based on proximity. So there was a lot of thought behind these rating systems, and it's also very transparent in the Excel spreadsheet. So you can look up the soils and find out what their characteristics, look up each parcel, find out what their characteristics are. It's got a high percentage of prime soils, it's got a high natural resource rating and so forth. And you can use the spreadsheet for that. I'd like to point out that the Encore system, does a similar process and might be, more user-friendly. And I encourage all of you, I'm not prepared to give you a tour of Encore, but I'd encourage all of you to use that system as well, because they do the same exercise with soil types and streams and wetlands. And they don't give you weighting systems like we did here, but they do tell you what's on each parcel. And I encourage you to look at that and become comfortable with Encore. Does that answer your question, Doug?
Yeah, do you remember, I know that they're sorted by tax map number in the back of the ag plan. Was it like 50 acres, 20 acres or greater where they had the rating? Do you remember what
I think it was 5, but
5 acres?
I'd have to go back and look that up.
It goes on and on.
It does.
It's pretty much every single parcel in the county.
Yeah.
Unless you have a small subdivision.
Right there. 8 pages of it.
Yeah, it diminishes in value, but yes. Well, if not, I'll review the open space plan. Well, open space conservation and scenic resources master plan, to use the full name. But this plan focused, it was more of it was a plan as opposed to the natural resource inventory, which is more of a documentation and a tool for review. But the open space, the first thing the committee needed to do in the open space plan was define what we meant when we said open space. We looked at the land cover, which had been mapped previously, agricultural lands, different ecological communities such as woodlands, wetlands, fields. We're definitely interested in stream corridors because of the water quality importance, steep slopes because of the relation to erosion and that impact on water quality, scenic views, and we also included regulated features. It did touch on mined features as well. So those were the definition of open space. And we also prioritized those parcels based on those resources as well to try to find out which parcels were the most important to the town based on the rating system that we came up with. So that rating system showed whether it was a rare or vulnerable ecological community, such as a silver maple ash swamp. The number of acres times the weight for that community was the rating system. For the open space, steep slopes, same thing. The number of acres times the weight that we'd assign to that. For the view shed, there was a previous study done that identified some significant views. So we did use those as a proxy for view shed. We did an analysis of what lands might be seen from that point, and that was defined as the view shed. So we did a parcel rating based on that, as well as within a buffer area of the stream corridor or in a regulated floodplain. So to use an example, the top rated of parcels were large parcels with a variety of open space types and possibly a stream. This is an example on Goff Road. It had a large area of woods, probably some wetlands and some ponds. Yes, it had 168 acres of woods, 100 acres of farmland in the pond, and those added up to 10,000 points. So that was a high score for land cover. In addition, it had some steep slopes, stream corridor, and land visible from Canandaigua Lake. So in addition to the scenic views from points, we did model what areas were visible from Canandaigua Lake based on only topography. So there's a rating system associated with that. I think I went backwards. And that's, I can share more of the open space plan, but there's, those were the features that were mapped, and we did a rating system for that as well. That's similar format to the ag rating system in that it's a spreadsheet that's searchable. And that was a quick overview.
What are their names again?
I can
Lou
pull
and
up some
Sadie.
more details if you're interested, or some maps if you're interested, but most of those maps that were in the in the open space plan, we carried over into the natural resource inventory. And I think most of you, if not all of you, were at that training, right? Or if not, I encourage you to watch the replay.
So Barb, the open space plan, the rating system is the same, right? It's basically every single parcel in the town of Canandaigua is rated in the back of the plan, and then it includes all the different factors, right?
There was a threshold. I wasn't every single parcel because, I think it was 5 or 10 acres was the cutoff.
How do we use that rating? I mean, we have a rating, so what do we do with that?
So really, the ERC, you guys should be using, you guys should be looking
Pulling
at
it
both of those documents when you're reviewing.
Right.
And that should be the very first thing that's included, honestly.
And that's why the encore thing that we need to talk about, we'll talk about that later, is so important, because it will give you this information right there in one thing. The planning department can compile it for you, and at a PRC, all you have to do is press a button and there it is. So it's not it looks cumbersome, but it really isn't. If you start to use encore and use it faithfully, and really this is a tool that we have that's very effective in helping us to understand how valuable each parcel is.
So if I could piggyback on that, so like the act, let me use an example. When a referral comes to them, the very first thing that is done is the act plan is opened up. What is the parcel rating? And they actually put that right in their facts of findings,
Right, I see that, and then the recommendations based on.
largely on that.
Mhm.
You could almost guess what the recommendation is gonna be based on just looking at the ag plan and the rating. And if it's a good rating, it's probably gonna be a loss of viable agricultural land. If it's not a good rating, that's where you get more of a subjective recommendation from them.
Yeah. Prime if drained. That's the gray area.
Well, the definition of that is, the farmers that I've talked to mentioned that if it's has drainage improvements on the parcel already, such as tile drainage or another artificial drainage, that land functions as well as primed. It's just as productive as prime. So some of the ag plans I've done since, we worked in Canandaigua, prime if drained, if we know that most of the farmland that's actually being worked has had artificial drainage, we rate that the same as prime because it's just as productive. If it's being actively farmed, it's likely that there's been drainage improvements that make it productive. Otherwise, it would be wetland.
Now, Barb, do you update your farm list rating if a farmer goes and puts drainage in now?
Well, what I'm thinking is that it's harder for farmers to do that now than decades ago. Some of these drainage systems are decades old.
Well, I see them every now and then, and you probably do it too, going around the country where the farmer is, putting drainage in.
I think we'd have to ask. Like, what's the dairy farmer that's, yeah, I see that he's done south of 5 and 20. He put some tiles in just last year, I think.
They may or may not be new ones, though. It might be replacing an old system. Yeah, and you're right, you would have to ask. But my hunch is that if it's been productive for several years, there's been some artificial drainage that's made it so if that soil type is prime if drained. So from the town's perspective, we're really focusing on the resource. So if the resource is the soil and the land, the management is up to the farmer.
Great. So Barb, I think one of the things that came up, even in the request to have this meeting with you, is like when the town hears about a development on a parcel, reminding us about these plans and how we can use these plans, but also maybe if the town is looking at open space protection, since a lot of the legwork has already been done and you've already identified the prime parcels that should be looked at for open space versus not, instead of us just going along willy-nilly and picking parcels. Can you just, that's really kind of where the gist of some of this came from. I wanted you to kind of touch on the rating system there a little bit.
So I can pull up the open space rating system. Let me find that. Share my screen and I'll show you that again. So for the open space plan, we cut it off at 1 acre, okay? So it's almost the whole town, but there were a lot of parcels less than 1 acre, so it really, left a lot off. So this is an excerpt of the rating system in Excel that's sorted by the highest rating ecological communities. So it's sorted by parcel, and of course, when there's subdivision, some of these parcel numbers might change, but you can find out what it used to be and get that number. So it's if you're used to using Excel, it's pretty simple to search for a parcel or sort by parcel and find the one that's close, right? If it's if it's been subdivided, it might have a different last digit or two. But you can look up the parent parcel and see, that this had a rare. And you can also use Encore to find the same information out, and it might be a nice, companion to do it that way, as well as looking at the spreadsheet. So we look at the ecological communities first, and there's a key: silver maple ash swamp, floodplain forest, other wetlands, the northern hardwood forest or the conifer plantation, successional fields, farmland, ponds, and this is outdoor recreation. So you can find those parcels that get high ratings on those, or you can look up a parcel and find out what the town considered that to be rated as. I think that'd be great, and we can talk after this. We've been working with the county to get this rating system on Encore. But I'm not sure, that's the best place for it. If it might be better off at the town. And then there's the slope rating, whether it's a 15 to 24, 25 to 30, or 40% or more slope. that gives you a rating number for the slope. Whether it's visible from Canandaigua Lake, that's its own score. Whether it's close to a stream or the lake, that's its own score. And whether there's regulated lands in it. So whether it's a regulated DEC wetlands or a floodplain, and we use the 100-year floodplain, that's a score. And it gives you a natural resource total, which is just that first column. And then the entire score. So these are your high scoring parcels. And, this is available, right? This spreadsheet is available. I don't know if it's posted, Doug, but you can certainly find it and use it.
It's on the town website.
There you go.
And then Barb, did you also map those highest rated ones? I thought there was a map that showed those. Maybe I'm wrong. I know we did it for ag, but I can't remember about open space. Was there?
Yes, I'm sure we do. Let me stop sharing and. Yeah, I'll pull that up. Is there any other? Is that clear about the rating system?
There's an easy explanation in the manual itself regarding the rating system in the appendices. So it'll give you examples how to use it, and then, it explains it. Yeah.
Kathy, I know you're on Zoom. Do you have any questions you want to ask Barb?
No, I'm good, thank you. And thank you very much, Barb. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of work done, and it was certainly a lot of thought went into it. So, as people come and, change, you have different people coming in or people weren't involved. It's, important to kind of revisit these and I'll show you a picture of the parcel rating map now.
That's map 14.
And where did you say that?
Parcel rating map. You're into the document and then it's here, page 42.
Where can we see this spreadsheet? I'm sorry, is it on our website somewhere?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kathy,
it's on
yeah,
the
the
website.
dark
under,
green and
the
blue.
Development office, and then all the planning documents, all of these. This is the open space plan, so it's that as well as the spreadsheet and everything.
So you said, I'm sorry, there was other people talking. So the spreadsheet's not online, but you could look at it in the development office. Is that what you said?
No, it's on the website. It's on under the development office. There's a tab, there's a link for planning documents.
Okay.
And then if you go there, it should be there. I'll email you guys after this meeting. Unfortunately, I don't have Wi-Fi, internet's not working here, so I can't do it at the moment, but I can send
No,
it.
I've seen these maps, so I must have just missed or not realized how to read them. So, which is more likely what happened. I do apologize for not having video, but this is what my video looks like. I'm just gonna stay audio, so I'm not gonna be rude, but I don't think you want to see my eyeball.
So this is a map showing those highest rated parcels. Again, similar to the ag plan, the larger parcels get a higher rating, but when you're looking, for the best bang for your buck, you can get a lot with those parcels. But even smaller parcels have resources, and that's something you can discover either through the Encore app or through the spreadsheet. And we've overlaid in a red outline parcels that have been preserved because that's a feature that goes into the rating system, and it's also important to know whether a parcel's near that. So the factors are, that the land cover type, is it natural or agriculture? There's steep slopes. Is it in a regulated wetland or flood zone? And visible from Canandaigua Lake. But again, all of the component maps are in the natural resource inventory as well. Those carried over because those are important to consider in project review. So I think I'm going to stop sharing if you're done with looking at the map. I'll assume so. I think that's what you were hoping for. Let me know if there's anything else you needed regarding these previous plans.
Anybody have any questions for Mark?
Wondering, there wasn't a huge difference in prime and prime and straight. If somebody adds drainage to a field, does that somehow, does someone come back and change the rating? Because it's like a 3-point difference from 10 to 7 for the prime and prime and straight. Does someone change the rating so it might boost that piece of, that parcel? And if so, who does that? I mean, do they?
So
If the farmer puts tile in the field, I mean, they don't permit anything to trigger.
right. So keep in mind, at the time we did the ag plan, as Bart mentioned earlier, we were also basing it in part on the regulations of ag and markets and the whole PDR, because we use the ag plan for the PDR applications. And so they don't recognize for that PDR program prime of drain, or they didn't at the time. Since then, some of their regulations have changed. Actually, now they've even gotten more stringent in this most latest round, where they're actually micro identifying the types of soils that they'll accept and the percentages and everything. So it's even got more strict. So leaving it separate for that purpose helps us when like the ECB and the Ag Committee review a project, when we do like the call for the PDR applications and stuff, because then they use the ag plant prime of drain, keeping it separate and stuff. So even if the farmer adds the drain tiles, ag and markets won't give them credit for it. It's still a prime of drain category.
But to us, it may have more significance.
Yes, to us, it may have more significance.
So we
Yes,
don't,
but we don't
trust
change.
them.
But what's interesting, looking at this map, is that we, the town, have preserved land that's in the prioritization is, number is the fourth slot down as far as prioritization, but we have been able to get the state to pay to preserve it. So
On some of the ag or some of
Yeah.
Well,
I'm talking about the PDR stuff. I'm looking at
right. Well, but you're
the
looking
dotted
at-
lines
You're
there.
also looking at the conservation open space map and not the ag plan. So keep in mind, you got to look at both.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Um,
But as far as
Right.
the rating system, it's still slid in there as valuable.
Or even the
Yeah,
conservation,
yeah.
yes.
I'm coming in from left field. I'm still stuck on our Ridgeline discussions and
for another day.
I'm just wondering, I'm just, like I
Really
said,
wanna-
I'm maybe outside of left field is where I'm coming from. But the view shed, the concept, and then scores that go with the view shed. I was wondering if that could be explained.
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot, and I know the town's been working on these Ridgeline maps and Ridgeline regulations for a long time. I'll pull up the map that we created for the land visible from Canandaigua Lake, which is similar to what you've considered for Ridgeline regulation, but I don't really have the details of that. So I think there's two things with the Ridgeline. One is, let's see, hopefully this will open it for you. I'm not sure. It's going to take a while, I guess. Well, I'll try again. But where is the town with the ridge?
Uh-huh.
Hopefully moving forward there pretty soon.
Any place you see sky above a hill is.
It's the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Here we go. It's a large file, so it took a while. It takes a while to load. but we modeled it using an elevation model in GIS. Basically, our modeler assumed he was 6 feet above the water in the middle of Canandaigua Lake, looking at the shoreline. So let me show you the results. So these are the areas that are visible. And of course, you can see in the southern part of the town, there's a lot of high ground. We also mapped the slopes, but I'm not sure if that's the right proxy. And then, I think the other part of your ridgeline regulation is certainly, what are the regulations? What do you want to protect or prevent? And how, what is the best tools to do that? But this was our map of the land visible from Canandaigua Lake. So probably doesn't show like ridge lines visible from the west. It's more from the lake. Thinking that was, so many people are out, in boats on the lake or enjoying the lake shore. This is the view from the lake.
Well, I think at the present time, Barb, the committee's looking at having it for the complete town, not just from the lake.
Yeah.
So ideally, that would be one color. There'd be another color for from views from the land. That's the view from the water. And that's the way it hits me.
Well, you have a map in the open space that talks about scenic views. And on that map, it is mainly the scenic views that are identified in the plan. There's 36 of them, I think, 35 of them perhaps, no, 36. And so you've got a map showing those for the rest of the town too.
Okay.
So you have what you need.
Okay.
You're going to develop code for the whole town. But this is, from my point of view, the view shed from the Canandaigua Lake is a specific protection area, because you have a lot of problems, as the committee that I worked on had, with trying to develop code for the whole town, because they're just not the same. These scenic views that are listed in the plan are individual scenic views as compared to a view shed. These are individual sites. A view shed is a contiguous area, looking up from the lake. So if you're considering the whole town, then believe me, the committee that I worked on, we did the same thing. And we ran into a lot of problems trying to get everything to fit into just specific codes. They're different. And so moving ahead with one and then doing the other might be more feasible in the short term.
And it's challenging to model that because so much, depends on vegetation, which grows, years to year, year to year. So trying to prepare for any situation that you might want to, have regulations in place for, rather than, case by case, which leaves it, up to the planning board in each individual, situation where they have so many other, elements of the project that they're dealing with. So I can see your challenge there.
One of the key elements in the draft code for the ridge lines is the fact that the CEO has to do a site verification of, is it in the view shed protection area? Because just as Barbara was saying, things change every single year because trees fall down, things get built, you can't see it like before. And that's the same thing that's going to happen as verification when you go to a town, the rest of the town, and you start doing scenic views. Because a lot of these scenic views, they're going to be different now. I mean, these scenic views were, I think, done in 2017. And probably by the time we get around to verifying them again, they're going to be different. It's an ongoing kind of, developing the information that helps you understand.
Well, Joyce, this map was didn't take any vegetation into consideration. It was just topography. I believe we used, LiDAR mapping. So
It would be
You-
difficult to do a map with like that. I mean, I don't know how you do it.
yeah, this was a
That's why the
simple
field
way to do it.
verification- Field verification is just one of the first steps that the town would do to make sure that what you're looking at is a ridge line and that it is viewed, can view, because you've got different
Right.
elevations of ridge lines there too, so they hide each other, whatever. It's takes hands-on approach here.
I mean, visual impacts of every project, is something that you need to do, site specifically. But having a guide for developers would be very helpful as to what you're looking for as a town and, what kind of remedies or design guidelines or requirements that you're going to impose. But the guide is helpful as a starting point anyway.
Mentioned the visual. I think when you did the open space plan, the NRI, you threw out the visual impact statement form and everything. I was hoping that when you do your presentation.
Well, I've just got a couple minutes before I have to prepare for another webinar, of course. But I'm certainly, always interested in answering any questions. This is, it's fresh in my mind. All of these projects aren't that old, so and they build on one another, from the ag plan to the open space plan to the natural resource inventory. A wealth of resources, and I think you're doing well in keeping this education program going, making sure all of your committee members know what's out there and refreshing that knowledge periodically. So thanks for doing that, Doug, and inviting me in to talk about these projects.
Has anybody got any questions? Thanks very much, Barb, for the presentation. And, I'm sure we'll be seeing you again soon.
Okay.
Thanks, Barb.
Bye, Barb.
Bye.
Now I'll turn it over to Joyce, who spent a lot of time over the last several years, and also her committee and coming up with something, and hopefully she can give us the solution today, so we can move forward.
Let's start with that one.
No pressure.
Just a little background of why we started to work with a Ridgeline code and why it turned into a viewshed Ridgeline code. The comprehensive plan and that was there's goals and the updated comprehensive plan had the goals that were presented and administered by the CIC for implementation. So the CIC developed a team, we called it the NRI team, and we had specific goals that we needed to do. One was the steep slope law, the other was the ridge line, and we had the NRI. And we also had a shoreline, which we've not even touched on at all. I'll just talk about the shoreline guidelines or shoreline codes. The Canandaigua Watershed Council at the time was planning to develop a shoreline code for all of the municipalities around the lake. And because of that information, the team, in agreement with the CIC, decided not to pursue a goal to develop a shoreline code. So that's why it's still hanging out there, that in the goals for the updated comprehensive plan. And one of these days, we're probably, if the Watershed Council has decided that it's not going to look at it, then and develop something like that, then probably it's time for us to, get our act together and do something like that, because there's a lot of pressure on the shoreline right now. Okay, so we looked at steep slopes. We developed the steep slope code. We presented it to the CIC. The CIC agreed that it was, they were agreed to move it on to the town board, and the town board approved it, and that became code that we're all using now as far as steep slopes go. All right, so then we looked at the ridge lines. There was nothing in that goal.
The other one was the on-site, which we also did.
Yes.
The on-site.
The on-site, yes, right.
The sewage.
Yeah. So when we started to look at the ridge lines, we realized that what we were actually looking at was a view shed question. And so we decided to delve into, and this is with the permission from the CIC, that we would broaden ridge lines to include a view shed. Something that was contiguous from looking up at Canandaigua, somewhere around the lake, up, into the ridge line, up to the uplands, okay? West of the lake was our focus on that. We realized that there was a lot of questions about how, where. One of the main things we had a problem with was the map. How are you going to map it? And then to our surprise, after we had finished all this, the open space master plan was put up, and LaBella had provided us with an option for mapping, which the committee had never really entertained. And that was to have a point of reference from the middle of the lake. Before, we had looked at Ontario Park from the east shore, Ontario Park, Deep Run, all of these kinds of things, Route 21, because these were all points of the view shed. But so it had already been
I'm
out.
sorry, but that's the map that Chris Jensen prepared, right? Because you guys are all familiar with that map.
Yeah.
That's the map you guys talked
Yes.
about one meeting, so.
Right, so there was a lot of, well, you've already probably had that discussion about mapping and where is those points of, what do they call it? I forgot now, but the points of interest, public interest or something like that it's called. Okay, so we never could decide where those points were. Was it Route 21? Was it Deep Run? But then when we realized, well, then I realized anyway, after everything had been finished, this map was a solution that we could use that map, and we can actually start to start moving our discussion from that point. And it brought the whole view shed into a much more contiguous kind of view, because you could go down south and you could, from the middle of the lake, then you could see it from this point. You could look up and to the west and you could see it from this point. You could go to the north and you could see that point again. So it gave us an opportunity, that this mapping, to really kind of ground the ridgeline view shed and view shed law. Back to the view shed law. Lots of discussions. One of the situations that we had is that we had Ridgeline Guidelines. And contrary to everybody's belief, the Ridgeline Guideline is code. And the guidelines were considered, and by myself included, as just a kind of something out there that you talk about, but it doesn't really have any weight and you don't have to do anything about it. Well, I realized when we got into open space that no, the guidelines were in code. The design criteria work that Chuck, you and your committee worked on, established it very definitely that it was code. Before, it was just kind of hanging out there. It wasn't included in code. Nobody was kind of looking at it. It was just like an extra, piece of information that you had to review. Once it got into the design criteria, it really grounded that into being a code that should be looked at. The planning board had a tool here to look at that. So in the draft that you have now, what you don't, the complementary document is the guideline for this code. However, at that time, we didn't kind of put those two and two together until the design criteria code actually was redone and was included, and you could go there and you could see it, and it was a definite tool. So we really need to, from my perspective, to bring that piece into this code so that it becomes more a one kind of code instead of something over here for ridge lines and then something over here for ridge lines. We need to bring those two together with just it would only take, maybe an article that says something like, and don't forget the design criteria and make a reference to it and somehow that it is part of the Ridgeline code, the viewshed code. The same thing would go with when we get a lakeshore code, the same thing would be with our lakeshore guidelines. That would be incorporated into that. So one of the things as I was reading through your minutes for that you had for the last few meetings, there were some questions that you were discussing, and one of them was the 25-foot height on a ridge line for any kind of structure. And the reason why there was some discussion about why 25, the reason why that came up is because there were and have been since this a number of dwellings that are actually three levels that can be seen from Canandaigua Lake and right at a ridge line. And so this was to help the applicant really know that we are requiring buffering. We don't want to see 3 floors. I mean, when you go down the lake or from the other side, you can see those houses that stand out. And that's not the kind of view shed that we were hoping that we could develop for our lake. And so that was why the height of 25. Remember also that there is an article in the draft code that says that the planning board has the authority to waive any of the articles in this code. So this is, it's a definite direction that the code is taking us, taking the town. But if you come across, if the planning board comes across a, site plan or an application where if this is not applicable, then they have the authority to just waive it. So that's all of these things, these articles in here are to ground this so that gives the planning board an option of agreeing or not because of the circumstances involved. I don't think you want to have a code that doesn't give you something to work from, because then things get lost in the process. The other thing that was about the overlays. So remember, this is a viewshed and ridgeline protection area, just like the farmland protection area and the strategic forest protection area. So this is a protection area of the town. Now, if you want to, and now what we're going to be faced with here with the overlay is how is this code going to interact with this protection area? Is it going to be an overlay? You have to make that choice. If you're seeing overlays, as Doug said, the farmland protection could have an overlay with code, and the strategic forest preservation area could have an overlay with code. Well, here now you've got code, okay, that is directly responding to a viewshed protection area. So you might want to discuss how you're going to handle that in regards to, overlays. Tom mentioned something about the definition of a ridgeline is anything that you can see behind, a ridge. If you can see the sky behind a ridge, it's a ridgeline. Well, and that is actually, there was many definitions that we could have gone with because they're all over the place. Basically, that is what a ridgeline is. What you've got, if you don't have that, is a ridge. You don't have a ridge line. You have kind of like a shelf, and you'll have those in the view shed from any elevation, on up to your whatever elevations you're talking about as far as your ridge lines go up to 1,000 or 1,100, 1,200, however high they are in our town. So they will have a background behind them. You will see woods, you'll see open fields, you'll see all kinds of things, but it's not a ridge line. It's just a shelf. It's a ridge. It's just a protrusion. The problem with having to outline a ridge line of viewshed area is that ridge lines don't accommodate that very well, because ridge lines will curve, they'll dip, they'll start at 1,200, they'll go down to 800. And so this is very, one of the reasons why we have to field verify what's happening up on those ridge lines, because all ridge lines are not created equal. And trying to make a line like you did the preservation area, it's a little iffy. You know, it's going to be, you're not gonna, when you look up, say, some Middle Cheshire and you look up to that ridge line, pretty well defined. You look up there, you can see sky, you don't see anything else. But you go down, the farther you go down Middle Cheshire Road, you lose that and you start to get like rolling kinds of topography. And that would be something that we would have to have the CEO actually kind of field verify that there is a ridge line there. So one of the other things, just the visual impact statements. There is a visual impact statement. It's online. It's the one that we looked at a lot. We have got a copy of the Napa Valley one from, I think it was Robin Evans, and that was up there. We looked at that. We felt it was much too complicated for what we were trying to do. I mean, it's page after page after page. And what the visual impact statement was actually more about is developments, as to anything over 4 equal, you know, a subdivision over 4. Because then that would be, you could take these questions and you could actually answer them. You know, if you're taking a single of the visual statement, with this visual statement on a single property, it's going to be a little difficult to get the answers that the question is asking. So once again, field verifying what the heck is going on up there is like the most important thing, because a single parcel, a small single parcel, is going to have a different impact with its surrounding area. But when you get 4, you're actually creating, okay, an impact area for parcel development. Anything larger than that would be. So that's the visual impact statement was thought to provide information from a larger project instead of so if you want to develop, there's all kinds of visual statements out there that you can get up online and everything. If you want to develop a single, you know, residential, you know, visual statement, then you can do that too. But a lot of this information comes through with seeker too, so you might not on a single have to you know, take it back.
Joyce, the one that you guys did, is it in the NRI?
No.
The visual impact statement that you guys put together, did we
No,
ever
it's-
adopt
It's
that?
not in the NRI.
No,
No, it's not in the NRI.
Do you know where it is?
Yeah, it's on.
It's on, yeah.
Oh,
It's right
It says
there.
PDF. Yeah, it's up there as a
Okay.
PDF.
That's right. I have a copy of it here. It's
and it was attached to the draft regs that we were looking at.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's the first time I saw it.
Yeah, it was just part and parcel of
Mhm.
code. It was never, you know, adopted or anything like that. It was just to meet to, you know, kind of be part of the code that the planning board could choose to use.
And we are.
We are. Right?
Here it is, the visual impact assessment questionnaire.
Mhm.
It's pretty lengthy. I mean, the developer is going to have to really will the project to complement or contrast with the visual character desired by the community. I mean, he's going to have to put some time into this, and then it gives you what you expect. Evaluate the scale and extent of the project features compared to the surrounding scale of the community. Important. I mean, for us to understand what their intent is here. So that's what the impact statement.
I think it develops an awareness that the developer
Yes.
doesn't have, and I
Yes,
think
that's right. I think this is an educational tool in itself.
Sean and I have taken it upon ourselves to submit that to the developer candidate for shores. And even though we
Yes.
can't require them to fill it out, we would ask them to at least consider it and look at the aspects of what it entails and the concerns that we have. And I think there wasn't any pushback yet.
Not yet.
And I think he's willing to do that and make it part of his redesign that he's working on.
Yeah, I think that that's an important thing. you know, you're developing a relationship with the developer, and that's how it should be. You know, we should be trying to develop the best project that you can, and you don't do that in an adversarial thing, but you do that with information, and this is what it is.
And for the ordinance committee, it'd be a good case study in applying that draft in terms of how it works and some of the pitfalls. That might.
Sure. Absolutely. The other thing that I saw that was the Encore we touched on. The Encore, I've been talking with Shauna about that. It's something that, you know, I've used with the ECB, well, okay, with the NRI, all right, this is where this Encore exploratory aspect of Encore came into being. When we were working with the NRI, we realized that all of these maps and things that we were talking about, how is the planning board and other boards and committees going to use this information in an efficient way? Because looking through all of these documents, especially online, forget it, you know, I would go crazy. And so what LaBella developed for us was the data that she worked with the county, with Sherry North, to develop Encore options so that all of our mapping of our town is in a specific area for us. And so Shauna is able to, we can do it, we can get that individually, but believe me, it takes a long time to download all that information.
You don't want to do it. Just let
Nobody
me
is
do it.
gonna do it. The ECB recognized in the beginning that, you know, nobody was using it because it would take us, every time we looked at a project, it would take us 10 minutes to download the document. Forget we could download it. And so, LaBella, Barb worked with Sherry and developed most of the mapping, or all of the mapping that you see on that tool. And what it is a very comprehensive tool. It does have some things in it that are a little redundant and everything like that, but I have my little cheat sheet that I would have. What did this mean? What does this abbreviation mean? So that I could go through that. If you haven't seen it on Encore, I suggest that you do it. It's on the FTP site. Shauna puts that up there with all of the projects. I don't, what do you call it now? Exploratory or what do you call it? Summary? Exploratory summary?
Yeah, that's what I called it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So just click on there and you will go, it will just, you can just scroll through all the maps and everything. It gives you just so much information about, right down to the soils. It'll give you all the soil information that you want. It'll give you all of the ecological communities. And all you have to do is scroll down and see which ones are particular to that project. I recommend it. It was a lot of work for LaBella to do that. And I think that it's, we have to do some work on it still. LaBella is, I don't know, stopped with some of the things that we didn't get on there yet, that have not been put on there yet.
Okay.
But the one thing about this is that it's going to have to be updated regularly.
Right.
For us to have accurate information. So if, like just the tiles, you know, that kind of an issue, if something happens on a parcel, it's going to have to be notated somewhere. Sure, you're going to have to give Sherry the data so that she can make the change, Sherry North, so she can make the changes. It's one of the, on the new comprehensive plan in the goals and strategies. It is one of the goals, and that we would have to look at. I think it's ECB is the responsible party there. So those are just the notes that I took when I was reading through the question.
The Encore tool, I think, is a fantastic tool that not every county has. There's a ton of information if you really start digging into it. I just had a conversation with the county administrator this week. We're having a little bit of issue with software with our assessor. And there might be a way for them to start including that even at the Encore, including updated photos, so that when you're reviewing a project, you would even be able to see up-to-date photos and everything through the Encore
So much
system.
potential,
Yeah.
just so much potential. It's just about getting the data to Sherry so that she can
Mhm.
get it into the, you know, into that tool.
I feel like I need to address your comments about the 25-foot height building restriction.
because I think that is extremely restrictive. I have been opposed to it as long as I've known that it exists. I've been a builder my entire life. And to build a two-story home within a 25-foot height building restriction is, it's not impossible, but it is not the best construction practice. You have to have shallow roofs, which create a lot of ice damming in the wintertime, particularly in this geographic region, and it's not practical. I'm not suggesting that we go to something exorbitant, but I do think that we need to give these builders and developers a little bit of relief. Now, in today's society, people like rooms that have 9 to 10 foot ceilings. So if you just figure that roughly, let's say it's 2 9.5 foot ceilings, that's 19 foot. And then if you have a foot of joist in between, foot of floor, that's over 20 foot of living space. That only leaves about 4 foot for height for your roof. And that is just not a good building practice in upstate New York.
Okay, one remark that I would make is that in the whole time that I have been either on the planning board or the ECB, we have never reviewed a ridgeline home. So there is not a drove of people who are looking to build on a ridgeline. It's a very precarious building kind of thing.
I'm not
So-
limiting my conversation to a 25-foot home, just to the ridgeline. I understand.
Oh, that's the only place where it's.
No, it is not the only place that it's required in town.
Oh, well, then that's another subject, yeah.
So
Okay,
that's just a
okay.
general
All right.
comment, and it pertains in some part to the ridgeline. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm not supporting or suggesting that we go to something exorbitant, but I do think that we need to do something that keeps up with 2021 building practices and good building practices, and a 25-foot height structure does not do that. And I've talked to many architects about this, particularly some of the more prominent ones that built here in Canandaigua. I've talked to many builders about this, and again, I've done this my entire life, and it's just not good building practice. So that's all I need to say about that. We don't need to tie up a lot of meeting time with that conversation.
Well, the one idea that we can take away with that too is that building height is, okay, it's flexible because the planning board will have that flexibility.
Well,
In certain
just to
cases.
address that, because I did hear you say that, the planning board relative to building height
CBA.
always defers it to the ZBA. And then the
Okay.
ZBA has to look at this.
Yes.
And in the last 5 years that I've been participating in the zoning board, we have been legislating through our reviews. And I don't think that that's what should be occurring, but that's a whole different conversation. I apologize. I don't need to tie up this
It is a
meeting this
different
time.
conversation, but you're both saying something similar. Maybe there is a way to look at that where the planning board could have some flexibility of a couple feet if there's a visual impact associated with it that's been mitigated or something.
And that's all I've suggested, is that we take a look at this for about a 28-foot would be much more ideal and buildable and much more current with building practices. So I'm not suggesting, again, something exorbitant, but I do think we need to give these people a little bit of relief, because particularly now with construction costs going the way they are, it's just another complication that we are adding to building in this geographic area. So that's all. I don't mean it. I apologize. I don't mean to take up time on this conversation.
Well, the mitigating factor here, of course, is the landscape plan. This is not 25 feet cut in stone and that's it. This is about how can the landscape plan, okay, buffer the view of a tall structure, 25, 28, whatever you want that to be, so that it is not that prominent in the view shed.
That is not considered when a project is being reviewed relative to height from the zoning board perspective.
I guess I could just say one thing.
That's what this code is doing.
Right.
This code is saying, if you can mitigate, okay, then the planning board has the, the authority to be flexible. But what we're looking at here is that's why we're looking at even colors and things like that in the Ridgeline Guidelines, is because this is about a bigger picture of just one parcel. We do have to regulate something and have a baseline regulation. But what the bigger picture is, it is about the view shed. And that's why it's called the view shed in Ridgeline.
And that's the way it starts. And I think, first of all, I think if we're the town fathers, what we're trying to do is noble. Then you reduce it to paperwork, and then you end up with, sometimes it doesn't always match what your aims are. At the final end, where we are in CBA, it becomes a negotiation, and there's gamesmanship, and that's okay. But the people who have been around the block know that we'll ask for 30. And then show some good faith and whatever, and it might end up being 27 or 28 or something with
Only
good faith.
27, only 27 if it's in a floodplain. We've never
Yeah,
approved.
no,
a
you're
building
right,
over
you're
25
right.
foot.
So there's a lot of back and forth, and the people who are veterans in doing that know how to do it, and it usually takes more than one meeting, or quite often it does. And we try to find middle ground where there's good faith and all this. And if that's what people want, that's fine. We usually feel pretty good about it. I don't think we're to the point where we feel at the end we've created sausage. It's the worst. But if it's funny, we start out with the high ideals, and then in the end, it has to do with people that have been around the block and know how the game is played. They prevail. And that's the way, in my mind, that's the way it works, John.
And just one more point about that, Joyce, and I understand the conservation aspect of this, and I appreciate it, and I support that. However, what ends up happening is a smart builder or a smart developer will go and manipulate the grades around the site in order to accomplish that 25-foot height. And that is, in my mind, more destructive to the environment than letting them build it an extra foot or two higher out of wood and framing, as opposed to modifying the entire site to accommodate those height restrictions.
I think that's why you've got steep slope law and some other codes that will intervene and or work with this code. This is not just a code, the only code that is going to look at that development, but we've got all other. Steep slope is like hand in hand with this code. So that is how it's amplified out to the surrounding. But there is some code, there is some language in this one that also limits 40 feet on each side of the dwelling, for clear cutting and, those kinds of things, which we believe me, we went round and round about what would be appropriate, and we talked with a lot of people, contractors, our CEO, about what would be appropriate, what would be reasonable, and of course, every application is going to be different.
Last thing I'd say is, if the people have done a scouting report on the current CBA, know to get into the negotiation, you sweeten the pot with environmental concerns, whether it's rain garden, permeable pavers, all those things get our attention, and that speaks to good faith. So that if there is a scouting report on the CBA, that would be part of what we currently stand for.
Or come in with
Right.
2x and then reduce it to 1x when you come back your second time.
Yeah.
The planning
That's
board
always-
does that all the time.
Yeah, that's always
Mhm.
research.
Yeah, that's the way it was.
You're
when I was
in a
at the
good-
Shoreline Guidelines, Same way. but-
Yeah.
Are there any other questions people have for Joyce?
Very helpful.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you very much, Joyce.
Good luck. I expect to see, how long has this been in the works here? How long does it sit there? Yeah, decades, you're right about that. It's been on the comp plan since the initial, the first one.
2003.
Yeah.
It's almost 20 years.
Yeah,
Oh,
and had some emphasis in the 2011 update, and we've got to move through this. This is just,
time to
there's
put
a
it
lot of
on.
pressure, there's a whole lot of pressure, and like I say, we're really looking at larger projects where this is going to make the impact that we want. So,
So your suggestion is that we move forward gradually on, getting something on the books. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Do the view shed, do the lake view shed first, then if you're
Yep,
gonna do
that's-
the
I
rest of
agree.
the
That's
town,
what I've done,
that's a
yeah.
whole new ball of wax.
It's
You've
a
got
it's a lot
take
lot
the-
easier to do.
Take the
Right.
draft that we have, apply it to the lake view shed, which
Yeah.
is subjective
Right.
or objective, excuse me.
And John, remember the 25 feet is only on the ridge line or the RLD.
Yeah, right.
So,
Right,
you know, it's a
Two of the
whole,
most prominent building spots we
Right,
have in the
right.
town.
yeah,
and unfortunately, a lot of those ridge lines have already been sucked up. You know, that ship has sailed.
but you've got some great.
That's why we came out with the
information
guidelines.
here to
It's
start
too late.
working with.
Yeah.
There's 35 views here, if you're gonna do the rest of the town, you know, you've got the basics in here already. You've got everything that you need to really start looking at it anyway.
Chris, didn't your committee at one point actually propose some regulations relative to those specific 35 views? Wasn't there something tied into the?
Well, yes, and that's because in the beginning, we were looking at a whole town, views in the whole town, and that's when that's when we did take these into
That lot over,
consideration. And we were
that
looking at
lot
Old
on Westlake
Brookside
Road,
and how
remember,
that
had the
came
view
and all
shed
this,
and they
you know,
built their
and all the
house.
views, but it was just, it
we
was
had
too cumbersome.
Saw the
We
roof
tried
off.
to meld it all together with a view
They
of
wanted
the
their-
lake, lake view, and then the rest of the town, it just weren't, it was like apples and oranges. We couldn't come together.
So what would the committee like to see happen then? I mean, we need to get something
I think
finalized.
we gotta
We got a lot of more discussion, but I.
look at
I-
that draft of the 2018 plan.
Make some changes.
And I think the biggest problem we had was, what do we apply it to? I think today we sort of discussed that maybe the first application would be the Lakeview shed and probably before we walk.
So you're talking about, because we mentioned before the overlay, I know you meant with the farming, with the protection overlay. Is that where we're thinking about headed a lake shed, a lake overlay district?
That those,
Yeah.
yeah, that those
Lakeview.
regs will apply to.
So, but to make an overlay district and then create other overlay districts for the other identified view sheds?
As they're determined, yes.
Okay.
Yep, I would think so. Which
I
may
think
take,
that's I think that's the cleanest.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the
That's
devil is in the
Yeah.
common viewing
Yeah,
area.
but that's the,
Yeah.
that's
Whose
the-
common viewing
Yeah.
area are you talking about? And it's
but
a
that's the
nightmare.
cleanest is the overlay in my
Yeah.
opinion. Because then,
The overlay on the lake is clean.
yeah, and then the others, it might be two, I don't even know what it'll look like for the rest of the town, but then the lake overlay, and then the others can be created based off of that as an overlay, which again, you don't have to get, it puts more onus on the project, people doing the project,
Mhm.
but also I think it's cleaner at the end of the day.
As long as you don't lose sight on some other project or some other ordinance doesn't come in. Proposal to modify some ordinance and this gets shuffled off. The way that this whole thing is handled over the years. The choice, no, this goes back 20 years at least.
And there's a lot
And
of,
we get to a certain point, and all of a sudden it's shelved.
I think
And
that's,
I would say you can't do that do the lake thing first. At the very next meeting, you keep talking about, not some other code. That would be my,
because there's a lot of pressure for this right now. To have it from all angles throughout. Developers who want to know, people who want to protect, landowners.
So does the committee want to,
That's a ridge line right there.
Yep, I can see
There's a
sky.
ridge line right there.
But not if you stand on 520.
Somebody planted a tree in our view shed.
Right, that's a violation. There's weeds,
But you're below grade.
but they're less than 25 feet.
So less than 25.
can we agree that at the next meeting, which will be August 2nd, that we will finalize the lake shed?
Well, I think it's gonna take a little more than.
Well,
that to
at least
finalize.
start reading over it and
Yeah, I think-
pulling it apart.
there was most of it, yeah, but you know, you guys been, I'm not on the committee, I'm just an observer, so. My
Well,
observation,
shut
we
up.
have been talking about this for quite a while. The last meeting we had, there's only one little area that really needed to be cleaned up.
I agree.
The whole Freaking thing.
Well,
There wasn't,
So, you
the
know,
details, if I remember correctly, Terry, we talked about the fact that we would hold a conversation about the details until we knew more and understood this a whole lot better conceptually. So that's why there hasn't been a lot of comments on the details yet. I mean, I think there needs to be some conversation about
there has
that.
to be conversation, but
And whether we
I'm
can
just
get
gonna
that done
caution
in
you again.
one meeting or not,
this
that's,
thing's gone on for years and years.
well, that doesn't,
The more you talk about it, the
because
more
it's
you
gone on
actually
for
get.
years and years, doesn't mean we ought to shuffle it through and hurry it.
I have a,
And
It's an important issue.
It's
And
brought much farther forward than ever in the past.
then we ought to be patting ourselves on the back that we're at least considering it and moving it ahead, but I don't think we ought to rush it through.
I
just
think
because
there's
it's
a
taken
middle,
years to get here.
I think there's a middle ground. And Joyce, you had mentioned updating. I think we need as an ordinance committee to get off this thing where what we create is the end all and it's perfect and then we'll live forever. I think we need to, in my mind, get something out there and say, hey, as after it's enacted and put in, we reserve the right to change and adapt. But to think that you're going to create something perfect, you're defeating yourself, right at the get-go.
And that's with all code.
Exactly.
You're updating, the ordinance committee updates all code.
It's all
You've been
everything.
doing that,
Even
you've
has to
been
be
doing that
That's what we're
all
leaving for
along, so
solar.
it's not like it's.
Actually, you're right. That's on my list.
Let me ask you a
that's our
question.
lead in. That's,
So when you, the
Speaking of-
model law that you have, the draft law, and you talked about what it references or the map that it references. Cleanest and simple. would just be to
That's it.
reference this
yeah, that's what we're saying, I think.
Absolutely.
Phase one.
Create an overlay district. Now, if you create an overlay district, and I'm a fan of overlay districts, I really am. But then you got to detail the purpose and the intent. That's going to take you a little bit longer than just taking this draft and referencing this map. Maybe that's a starting point. And then a second step, you create the overlay district if that's what you want to do. And so,
It's kind of like how you did the farmland protection area. You did that first, and now you're thinking about the overlay or the strategic forest preservation area. It would be the same process, so you're duplicating the process that the town has already used before.
or the other thing you could do is you could, it would be a separate law and then update the zoning map. You could take this map and codify it by calling it. Like,
It's
make sure
protection
there's-
area.
yeah.
What exactly what it is.
That would be pretty fast to just be able to modify that to reference this map at the date of this map. And then those are the parcels that are already identified right there on this map. That are in this that would be impacted by this law.
Then in summary, what we're saying is we are going to modify the conversation from discussing ridge lines to discussing scenic views or, right? Visibility, scenic
Totally.
visibility. That's what we're talking about now, right? As opposed to pure ridge lines.
Well, it is a view shed and ridgeline protection area.
I understand, but
That is its title.
using that map,
Yeah.
if that's what we're gonna do, it's no longer a conversation about ridge lines. It's a conversation about visibility.
The ridge lines are there too.
They're
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that space, but the reality of it is, if I look at that map, it's got nothing to do with ridge lines. That's got to do with visibility. Now, there could be ridge lines within that. But if that's the case, then we need to look at these details with that in mind, because it's no longer a conversation about ridge line. It's a conversation about view sheds. And that's okay. I'm just pointing that out because I think that with that in mind, that's how we have to look at the ordinance that we're going to create, as opposed to looking at it as from a ridgeline perspective. It is both, I understand.
Ridgeline, view shed determines your ridge lines.
Yeah, the ridge lines are going to be within that purple area.
Ridgeline is visible from Canandaigua Lake.
That's right.
Not all of it.
No.
Right, the ones visible from wherever that point is in the middle of the lake, 6 feet above the water
I
level.
mean, the lake set, like the The Canandaigua Lake Scenic Protection District, something, scenic protection over, something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think they titled it here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Jared,
it's-
if I'm not
If I
mistaken.
can-
It's up
They
higher.
just love the code.
The little tiny letters?
Use
No,
it
right
at
there.
There you go.
Ridgeline
Okay,
Protection.
thanks. Like you're messing.
Can I just ask you to share your screen for a minute, to see what you're looking at, and then for the recording also, that would help.
Actually,
Yeah,
yeah, what I'll do is I'll
Shows
send
us
you a
how easy it
link
is
to
to
the
get
map. I'll probably be easier.
Just let, for the recording, for people,
Yep.
that, that look at this later, would be helpful as well.
Why don't we, at the next meeting, I'm just asking Doug about getting this modified and go with that map also and incorporate it, so we do have something available for the planning board as soon as possible in regards to.
I think we also need to look at the proposed ordinance and fine tune that. At least I had some thoughts and
Yeah, I think
modifications that
Can you-
we'd want to talk about.
Can you send this to us, Doug?
Yeah.
This map,
Yeah.
to all of us, please, as a reference point.
Would that be agreeable with the committee? Or we just discuss? Next meeting, we come back to August 2nd.
And would you mind sending the draft ordinance again, please? Also, when's our meeting?
August
Wait a second.
I know we ran long today, but there was a lot of things that we needed to discuss. on
We discussed a lot.
So, are there any other questions before we?
Before we close, one of the many pass outs we had from the last meeting was this, the regulation in Napa. And I think about it when the folks on the east side are appalled with that project that's being proposed. And the folks where you live, Bob, that were concerned about the Cook property. Napa, as a community, created a land trust back in 1976. They have preserved with public money over 50,000 acres. That's bigger than a whole freaking town of Canandaigua. Think about it. Only land that gets preserved here is when we're yanking money from the state and the PDRs and making farmers rich. People should put their money where their mouth is. If they don't like what's going in next door, get together and buy it. That's cheap talk, but I thought that was very interesting. Median home value in Napa is $867,000. Median age 38, so they're a hell of a lot younger than we are. Younger, and richer.
And a lot richer.
They're all .com
They're all .com.
.comers, but I thought that was very interesting, but in excess of 50,000 acres. I guess not. I guess not. I didn't get their tax rate.
But that's how you maintain an exclusive community, right?
Yeah.
Because the little guys are pushed out. If it's a
They-
family, if it's passed down in a family, it doesn't mean, with those taxes
So Tom, are
raised
you gonna
out.
cede
It's,
that?
yeah, it's
Are
a
you
different
gonna
kind of
cede that
eminent domain.
preservation money?
I'd be happy to. I'll match anybody.
So,
Okay.
Tom, you'd be interested, I know you've been a huge advocate for this for years. Sarah and I, and it's only been internal conversation with Sarah and I, we've started working on, we're going to have to work on, bring something to the board, to the town board, and it's gonna have to really work its way through all process. State ag and markets is significantly changing the PDR program. So it's pretty good for us. So if we're going to keep doing conservation, whether it's farmland, open space, whatever, we've got to talk about what that looks like in the town's involvement in that. We've kind of come up with 4 avenues of how maybe to do about this, but there's a lot of work to do. It's all, I don't even want to get into the details because we're still trying to figure it out ourselves, but we've been exploring any number of different programs, including town and what that might look like and some ideas to bring forward. So it's definitely going to be something we're going to have to discuss. And we're forced to discuss it because ag and markets is changing the program.
Well, every time there's a development, somebody says, well, geez, they can't do that. Why doesn't the town buy it, you know?
Right.
And you say, where the hell's the money?
Town's got the money.
No, but I'll be happy to participate.
I think it's important that we have a good dialogue. So what we do in ordinance committee helps planning board and development office in their dealings with developers and whatever. And we need to have that communication. So we make sure that they can do their job and aren't, at a disadvantage.
Anything else today? And I'd like to get a motion we adjourn.
Already?
Motion made. Second.
Good meeting. Second, all in favor.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
So Napa doesn't have affordable housing.
I'm guessing they don't. Now, maybe they got a